Welcome to this How to Analyze a video. Today we're going to look at one position from the book The How to Study Chess on Your Own Workbook Volume 2 by Davorin Kujasevic for players rated between 1500 and 1800. I did a review video about this book and I can wholeheartedly recommend it. It's not too difficult, but it's challenging and it's very well structured. So this is the position at hand, and we're going to use our standard process. So we're going to look at orientation, the position characteristics, what does our opponent want to do. Then we calculate and evaluate, and part of it is visualization. So I will not be showing a lot of moves in first instance at the board. And we have to evaluate the position at the end of our calculated lines, and we verify the calculation by checking if we really consider the strongest reply of our opponent. So let's get started with the orientation on this position. What's going on? Black just took on g3. That's the change in the position. And what else can we say? So the bishop on g3, of course, can be captured by the pawn on f2. The knight on h5 is hanging, and the rook on f8 is looking to the knight on f3. So the rook on f8 has a half-open file. It looks a bit like a French structure. Black might have a vulnerability on h7. So we have a bishop on b1 looking at h7. We can add an attacker with knight g5. Which at the same time would attack the knight on h5. So Black's king is vulnerable. And as part of the orientation, we could look at what I call brute force move. Like, it's probably not going to work, but it will give us information, which is to take the bishop on g3. We have to verify if that actually works or not. So can you come to a conclusion about f takes g3? So f takes g3, most likely. Black will continue with queen takes g3, king h1, queen takes h3, king g1, and now what? How does Black continue their attack? The queen cannot do it by herself, so has to have support. And the easiest way to bring support is knight at g3. So we have a queen on h3, a knight on g3, and a king on g1, and the pawn on f2 is gone. What is the threat after knight g3? Can you find a threat by Black? The threat is to take on f1. And after, for instance, a move like queen f1, the knight on f3 can be captured. And if white moves the rook, can you find the refutation of rook f2 and rook e1? In both cases, Black can mate. So rook f2, queen h1 is immediately mate, and rook e1, queen h1, king f2, queen h2 is also mate. So, as part of the orientation, we saw that white cannot take on g3. So this brings us to, what would you play here with Black? Given the fact that the knight on h5 is a vulnerability and that h7 is weak, if Black was to play here, probably Black would try to stabilize their position by playing a move like g6. So it's not necessary to withdraw the bishop to d6, because f takes g3 is not a threat. But we can address some vulnerabilities in our position by playing a move like g6. So we know what Black would like to do, and we know that we cannot take on g3. And now Kujasevic asks us to evaluate three moves. The first one is bishop takes h7. The second one is knight g5, and the third one is queen c2. So bishop takes h7, knight g5, or queen c2. Bishop takes h7 resembles a Greek gift, right? So the idea is king takes h7 and knight g5. But we have to see whether it works in this position or whether the specifics of this position makes it impossible to play it. So let's calculate. Can you evaluate whether and calculate whether the Greek gift works in this position? So we have bishop takes h7, king takes h7, knight g5. The king cannot go backwards because we take on h5 and the attack continues. So black comes forward and plays king g6. So what are the standard moves when you consider the attacking motif of the Greek gift? There are three: queen d3, h4, and queen g4, right? Those are the standard moves that you consider whenever you are calculating a Greek gift. Well, in this position, h4, of course, doesn't make any sense because there's no threat of h5. So we can disregard the standard move h4. So let's look at the two other moves. Queen d3, checking the king on g6. And how to defend with black? Well, black can interpose with rook f5. And in many Greek gift positions, we would have a follow-up with g4, but the g-pawn is gone. So that doesn't work either. That leaves us with queen g4. So we have bishop takes h7, king takes h7, knight g5, king g6, queen g4. Can you visualize the position? And what is going on? Right? White is threatening a discovered attack with the knight on g5. And also the queen on g4, right, is adding protection to the white king, and f takes g3 becomes a possibility. So how to continue there with black? Well, black could decide to attack the queen with knight f6. So we have bishop takes h7, king takes h7, knight g5, king g6, queen g4, knight f6. Now white takes the bishop on g3, the queen on c7 takes on g3, f takes g3. Can you, after this calculation, can you visualize the position and say who is better? In this line, bishop takes h7, king takes h7, knight g5, king g6, queen g4, knight f6, queen takes g3, queen takes g3, f takes g3. Who is better and why? What are the characteristics and the dynamics? And what would you consider with black? Well, if you can clearly visualize it, you could say that the bishop on e3 is defending the knight on g5 and the pawn on d4, which gives black a tactical possibility to play knight takes d4. Bishop takes d4, king takes g5. That would be hard to visualize all the way, but I mean, a move like e5 would be feasible to find, and the position is equal. So let me go to that line. Bishop takes h7. And now we continue. King takes h7, knight g5, king g6. And we said after queen d3, rook f5, black is winning. So the critical move was queen g4, knight f6, attacking the attacker. The queens get traded. And we had to evaluate who is better in this position. And the bishop on e3 had a double function, defending the knight on g5 and defending the pawn on d4. So black has knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, king takes g5. But an alternative that would probably be easier to spot would be a move like e5, activating the bishop on d7 and putting pressure on d4, and with equality. So we concluded that the move bishop takes h7 is not winning. So we have to go to the two other moves. Let me back up. Knight g5. Knight g5. So now we have two attackers on h7. And how to continue. Again, so knight g5, bishop on b1 and the knight on g5 are attacking h7, and the queen on d1 is attacking the knight. And of course, right, if you think about a move like a g6, there's knight takes h7, king takes h7, queen takes h5. So that leaves us with knight f6. Right, so the double attack and one of the targets defends the other target. Can white in that position take on g3? Can you visualize that? So we have knight g5, knight f6, f takes g3, queen takes g3, king h1, and black picks up the undefended bishop on e3, but queen takes e3 and is winning. So knight g5 also does not work. That leaves us with one move. So let's back up. Queen c2. Queen c2 attacks the pawn on h7. But when you start looking at queen c2, you also notice something else. It's adding a defender to the second row. So this whole idea of queen takes g3, queen takes h3, suddenly, after f takes g3, we can play queen g2. So that looks very interesting. Let's start to do the evaluation. Queen c2. First we look at the, you could say, the stupid move, the brute force. Rook takes f3. Let's see if it works for black just to walk away with the king and allow queen takes h7. So queen c2, rook takes f3, queen takes h7, king f8, because otherwise after king f7 white takes on h5 and picks up the rook on f3. So king f8, queen takes h5, and who is winning there? Well, white is attacking the rook on f3, and at the same time is threatening queen h8, picking up the rook on a8. So black cannot ignore the threat and just take. So queen c2. What else does black have? Well, the move that we had in the previous variations, knight f6, that was working, does not work in this line, because after f takes g3, queen takes g3, there's queen g2, and the attack by black evaporates. That leaves us with g6. That's the move that black wanted to play to start with, if it was black to move. So now we have to evaluate if we can take on g3. So we have queen c2, g6, f takes g3, queen takes g3, queen g2, looks very safe. So the only opportunity that black has is knight takes g3, attacking the rook on f1. And how would you continue there? Can you see the change dynamics in the position? In that position, the queen on c7 is undefended, and the knight on g3 and the queen on c7 are on one line. How can we exploit it? By creating a pin with queen h2. So after queen c2, g6, f takes g3, knight takes g3, one candidate move would be queen h2 to create a pin on the knight. What are other candidate moves? I mean, it would be logical perhaps for a lot of players just to say, I'm going to give up the exchange. play queen g2 anyway. If they don't see the move queen h2 at the start of this line, and they cannot find it. And after knight takes f1, rook takes f1. What's the material balance? Can you tell me what the material balance is after queen c2, g6, f takes g3, knight takes g3, queen g2, knight f1, rook takes f1. So white has 4 pawns, black has 6 pawns, so black is up 2 pawns, black has a rook, and white has 2 minor pieces. So it's 2 minor pieces against a rook and 2 pawns. How do you evaluate that position? Actually, white is still doing very well there, because the king is, black's king is still very vulnerable, with the bishop on b1 and the queen on g2, staring down at g6. So the coordination of black is not optimal yet, and white has major threats there with the 2 bishops. So queen g2 would also be winning, but queen h2 is the best move. So what about moving the rook? Right, that would be a third option. Instead of pinning the piece, and instead of allowing knight takes f1, rook f2. But rook f2 fails to knight f5, attacking the undefended piece, the bishop on e3, and then black is coming in with the move queen g3 with a winning attack. So let's have a look. So we found a winning line for white, a dual purpose move starting with queen c2, threatening to take on h7 and threatening to take on g3, followed by queen g2. So we saw that g6 is the only move for black, and then we take on g3. Queen takes g3 is not threatening, because we play queen g2 and we're completely safe, so this is the most challenging. Queen on c7 is undefended. The knight on g3 and the queen are on one line, so it would be logical to play here queen h2 to pin the knight to the queen, but of course that might be difficult to see at the beginning. So queen g2 is an alternative, and despite the material balance, white is doing very well here with 2 pieces, right? A dark squared bishop and a knight for a rook and 2 pawns because of the unsafe king. And we said that after rook f2, black is actually in trouble because of the move knight f5, attacking the bishop on e3, that's undefended, and also threatening to enter with the queen. So if white says, I'm going to defend that bishop, the queen is coming in, right? The king tries to run away, and now black is bringing more attackers and winning the game. So this concludes the analysis. So we had 3 candidate moves, and the dual purpose move queen c2 was the winning continuation. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you subscribe, and I hope to see you back. Thank you all for watching.